Good afternoon and welcome to the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association's kickoff to the 2019 federal election, A Home for Everyone. I'm Dominica, Director of Programs and Strategic Initiatives at CHRA, and I'll be coordinating today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us. The purpose of today's webinar is to formally launch CHRA's election campaign, A Home for Everyone. CHRA's key election messages will be presented, the campaign website will be unveiled, and most importantly, we will discuss how you can get involved. I now have the pleasure of welcoming CHRA's Executive Director, Jeff Morrison. Jeff will discuss CHRA's key election messages and the engagement that has already occurred with political parties. Jeff will also unveil the Home for Everyone website and most importantly, discuss how you can get involved. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, thank you, Dominica, and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are across this big country. Je vais mentionner que la plupart de mes commentaires sera en anglais, mais comme vous pouvez voir, les graphiques seront en anglais et français. Si vous avez des questions en français, des commentaires en français, absolument. Je suis aussi très heureux de répéter quelque chose en français si quelqu'un veut. Juste mentionne ça dans la boîte et Dominica va mentionner ça à moi. So just to say that the bulk of the remarks I'll be delivering will be in English. However, the slides are bilingual, and of course, if anyone would like to ask a question, make a comment, or ask that a comment be repeated in French, please just make a mention in the box, and Dominica will give me a little nod or heads up, and I'll be happy to repeat a comment in French. So as Dominica mentioned, today is really about kicking off the CHRA pre-election campaign. As I'm sure you all know, here we go. I'm sure you all know, the Prime Minister has essentially confirmed that the next federal election will be on October 21st, 2019. I say more or less, because although that's the date that's been mentioned, until the official writ is dropped, nothing is for sure. And of course, 338 seats will be up for grabs, including the seat that was just, the by-election that was just held yesterday in BC. All seats across Canada will be essentially up for grabs. Now, if you've been following the media as of late, in the political media in particular, you'll know that in many ways, the really unofficial election campaign by the parties has already begun. The posturing, the key messaging, in many ways, has already been kicked off by a number of the parties. You'll also know that the polls have been shifting quite a bit in the past few months. Having said all that, if there is one thing that we have learned over and over and over again, it is that elections matter. An election campaign focuses messages, it focuses people, and so therefore, what is current today and what is the case today may not be so for tomorrow. So using an election campaign, that focused period, and of course the period leading up to it, is absolutely essential to getting messages out and of course to getting candidates and parties talking about your messages. That's what today is about. That's what the next few months will be about, in particular for the community housing sector. So in terms of turning it back for a moment to CHRA, we have been working and thinking about this federal election for some time. In fact, and just to give a bit of a brief background in terms of how we got here, our thinking really began in earnest last spring with respect to what our messages and other things should be. We really kicked it off at our Congress in Ottawa in 2018 when we asked members for their feedback on what those key messages should be. Over the summer and fall of 2018, our newly minted advocacy committee and the CHRA board of directors discussed at length what those key messages and the tactical plan should be, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. In October last year, we held our annual Housing on the Hill Day. We actually began talking about some of those key messages with members of Parliament, getting some feedback from them. That all had helped to hone what those messages should be. excuse me, in really late 2018 and the early part of this year, we then began meeting more directly with political parties, the folks that were actually holding the pen in developing party platforms to influence the content of those parties, of those platforms. We've met with representatives from the Liberals, the NDP, the Conservatives, the Green, and I should add, those meetings are continuing even now. We're hoping to have some meetings with Green representatives. The NDP in particular have been ongoing in their consultation with us. We have a meeting coming up with the Conservatives, and as well the Liberals are actively seeking our feedback. So this behind the scenes type work has been ongoing and will continue. Also in this time frame, we've been working closely with other national associations so that we can align our messages.
So as I was saying, we've been communicating with other national associations. What we'll be saying, we of course want other both housing and non-housing related organizations to be saying. So those conversations also are continuing. And along that vein, we've been working with the newly minted Canadian Alliance of Nonprofit Housing Associations, typo there, which represents the associations, OPCOASH, BC, ANFA in Alberta, etc. Again, to try and align our efforts and make. And we've been using some of our key messages to influence recent statements on development. For example, the federal budget a few weeks ago, we met to respond to that. And then lastly, we've been working with a private consultant to help develop some of the tools that we're releasing today, as well as some other tools that will be. How we've gotten to where we are today. Today, what we want to do is first of all unveil the campaign theme, perhaps kept secret out there. We want to share with you what those key messages are that I referred to. We'll, as Dominica mentioned, unveil the campaign website, and as she mentioned as well, most importantly, provide you with an opportunity to get involved and how you can do that. So, again, words kept secret. The theme for our campaign is a home for everyone, en français, un toit pour tous. The advocacy and the board really did have a lengthy discussion as to whether that would fly, but it was something that was deemed to be quite relevant.
So as I was saying, the theme is a home for everyone, un toit pour tous en français. That will essentially be our brand and our hashtags for the next really several months. We hope that those are a theme and a brand that you will continue and you will use as well. In terms of the key asks, there are three that the board has agreed to, and those are first and foremost, to develop and implement an urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing strategy with the ultimate goal of raising housing standards for particularly urban and rural Indigenous peoples to that of the non-Indigenous population. This is not new. This has been a key ask of CHRA and of course our Indigenous caucus for some time. However, until we fully realize this goal, it will remain one of, if not our key message and our key ask to the federal government until a full strategy is actually in place. Second, we are asking for the government to preserve and enhance the existing stock of community housing, and how? By first making federal rent subsidies permanent, increasing access to capital for renewal, and increasing investments in social supports. As some of you know, through the National Housing Strategy, the Federal Community Housing Initiative is meant to extend federal rent subsidies for at least 10 years. We want that on a full-time permanent basis. We don't want to see the FCHI essentially be a Band-Aid. We also know that even though the co-investment fund is meant to increase access to capital for repair and renewal projects, it's insufficient and that there is a great deal more renewal that needs to occur. So we're asking for additional funding there. And lastly, we know that one of the things that makes social housing different and special are those key social supports you provide. And so as a way of enhancing the existing stock, we're asking that the existing social envelope, particularly to the provinces, be increased so that there is greater social supports that housing providers can access. And then last, our third ask is again, not a surprise, increasing the supply of community housing. And how we propose doing that is greater access to capital for new construction. And a key element is expanding the existing federal lands initiative. We of course know that that increasing supply is paramount. We know demand for affordable housing is going up and up. So although the National Housing Strategy did contain, through the Co-Investment Fund, measures to increase supply, it's woefully insufficient given the demand. And so we propose a suite of tools in which government could look at to increase access to capital. But we also know that the Federal Lands Initiative is a really good yet untapped program that could be expanded in its mandate to increase supply. Right now, the Federal Lands Initiative, after the NHS, was increased to $20 million per year for federal land to be transferred to housing providers. We think that amount is grossly insufficient, and that if expanded, it could be used to also acquire municipal, provincial, or even private sector land, which could then be transferred to housing providers, and as well surplus buildings. That's been an untapped feature of this initiative or others. We think that's something that could be taken advantage of. So those three key asks: an urban and rural Indigenous housing strategy, protecting the existing stock, and increasing supply for new community housing. Those are the three key asks that you'll hear us talk about at length over the next several months. So how do we intend to do this? Well, first of all, today we're unveiling our new campaign website, homeforeveryone.ca, en français, 3pour-tout.ca. Je vais mentionner que le site français n'était encore publié encore. Il y a un problème technique que nos consultants nous disons juste ce matin, et donc le lien 3pour-tout.ca n'était pas disponible jusqu'à demain. Demain, les gens ont dit que c'était disponible. Bien que le contenu français est disponible sous le lien anglais. So just to repeat, the English site is now up and running. The French site, 3pour-tout, the link is not yet available. It will be tomorrow, but the French content is available via the English site. So that site contains a number of resources. You see here one of the homepage for the English site. I would encourage you to explore that site now, homeforeveryone.ca. There you will find a number of resources, including a one-page handout that you can download, or frankly we can mail to you, which you can hand out to candidates. You will have access to a tool which automatically allows you to write a letter to your federal politician and soon to your federal candidates once they're all nominated. You'll find a couple success stories in which you'll hear and candidates can read about stories of the impact that community housing has had for them. So this is a site, I'm just kind of scrolling through some of the pages here. This is a site we'd encourage you to get to know, to play with, and if you can, to please, as this slide shows, to please send a letter to your parliamentarian and eventually to all of the candidates. You'll also find more information about those three key asks that I just went through, including some one-page handouts that allows you to communicate with candidates or other politicians in more depth on any of those three key issues. I should also add that, of course, social media plays a key role, and you'll find, as this slide indicates, you'll find some graphic images that you can use on social media as well. Again, just a few other examples. So please do review this site, and again, feel free to use the tools as best as you can. In addition, over the next few months, we're going to be looking at a couple potential events. We have been, as I mentioned earlier, we've been working with the Canadian Alliance of Nonprofit Housing Associations, our provincial counterparts, to look into the option of organizing some regional, either one-on-one or potentially all candidates events. That is not yet confirmed. We'll be posting more information about those kinds of events as information is available. But one thing I would say is please, 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 if you wish, take initiative and organize your own event. We here at CHRA are happy to provide some information, provide some guidance in terms of what that event could look like. All you need to do is contact us. We can help you get your own event put together. And of course, there are all candidates meetings that will be happening, organized by different groups throughout the country over the next several months. Please attend and ask questions about housing. Ask the candidates where they stand. Even if it's not an explicit housing specific event, just by asking questions, you can get housing on the agenda. And one event we will be organizing, likely in September, although date to be determined, is a relaunch of the Rental Housing Index, which, as some of you know, was a fantastic tool that the British Columbia Nonprofit Housing Association took the lead to develop. That new index will be updated to contain federal riding specific information. And so once that information is available and the site is relaunched, you'll be able to go on, download information specific to whatever federal riding you're in, which you can then share with your candidates in your riding. So again, once that's up and going and that site is relaunched, you'll have yet another tool available to communicate effectively with politicians. So the key question, how can you get involved? So just to repeat a few things, again, please do check out the website. Encore en français, ça sera disponible demain. Mais le lien est disponible demain. But in English, A Home for Everyone is now up and running. Take some time to learn about the issues, although I don't think I need to say that. You live those issues on a day-to-day basis. And if in communicating with candidates, you can relay your own experiences, you can relay your own stories, why renewal of existing housing is important, why an urban indigenous strategy is important. That can only serve to strengthen the efforts. So please do incorporate your own experiences with those key messages. In the next few weeks, we'll be launching some election-specific newsletters. We're not sure yet if it will be sort of within our existing newsletter flash or something distinct. That will come. But the purpose of those newsletters will really be to help provide additional information and updates on developments as updates happen. So for example, as political parties release their full platforms, we'll be analyzing those to determine what they're saying vis-a-vis housing. So any of those sorts of developments we'll be sharing, and again, all meant to help inform you as you communicate with your local candidates. And please do use some of those online tools. They're fairly easy, not fairly easy, they are very easy to use. Only takes a minute or two to send a letter or to post a note on your social media, so please do. Those handouts that are available online, please download them, or again, we're happy to mail out copies of them. Those are very quick, easy to follow handouts that really explain the issues and explain some of the challenges facing community housing. As I said, please do discuss on social media the hashtags A Home for Everyone, Un Toit pour Tout, again, will be essentially hashtags that CHRA will be using, and we hope that you'll all be able to use them as well. And then lastly, please do attend events in your region. Be proud of community housing that you represent, as you should. Please do ask questions, or if you're so inclined, absolutely, by all means, please organize your own. We're here to help if that's an option. There are 338 ridings. Obviously, we're not able to organize events in all of them, but together, we can reach a lot more candidates, and those kind of events are great ways to do that. So next steps, today again, we're really just launching our website. We're launching our tag. We're launching our messages, and we're hoping over the next few months to then build on this by communicating even more with not just members, but supporters, as well as other organizations, both housing and non-housing related, to really broaden the message, to make sure that every candidate in the country, and of course every party, is familiar with those three key issues we've raised and will include them in their platforms and in their commitments based on whoever forms the next government. As mentioned, September, October, once we're really into the, call it meat of the federal election campaign, there will be some regional events, the relaunch of the Rental Housing Index, and of course our communication out to you as developments happen will increase commensurate with how the campaign itself unfolds. So watch for more information. Unless something dramatic happens, October 21st should be election day. So, and I know this is perhaps cliche to say, but get out and vote. Vote for whichever party you think will best protect and strengthen the community housing sector. Following Election Day 2, and again, we're thinking about that post-election period. Obviously, it's too soon to say. None of us have crystal balls. We have no idea who will form the next government. We have no idea if the current political leaders will be in place. But whomever that will be responsible for housing, we'll be meeting with them and ensuring that the messages that have been communicated throughout the campaign will continue to be heard by whomever forms that next government. So with that, again, thank you for taking a bit of time to listen to what we have on the go. This is a plan and a program and tactics and messages that have been very much developed with our membership and through our board. But as always, we want to hear from you, want to know if these messages resonate, want to know if there's perhaps something that's missing, and want to know if there are any ways in which we can help support what you're doing there on the ground or with your candidates. I should lastly add that this is the bare minimum of what we'll be doing. There will be additional resources, additional tactics that will be pursued over the coming months. But at least today, we wanted to ensure that you can start communicating, start making sure that your candidates and your politicians know where you stand, know that housing is important. I think we've seen some successes already thus far in terms of what some of the parties have said, and especially in about increasing the profile of community housing. I'm actually fairly confident that housing will be a top of mind issue in the 2019 election. That's not by coincidence. Together, we've all put it there. Now our challenge collectively is to ensure that it remains there and that parties are actively talking about it and talking about solutions. So I will leave it there and pass it over to Dominika to see if there are any questions and take it from there.
So as your questions are coming in, I'm going to ask the first one of Jeff. We have a couple that are saying, love the colors of the website and the actual website itself. So that's just comments that are coming in. But the first question was, I think, on your first point about the meetings that we've already had with some of the parties. And the question is, were those meetings more or less on the behalf of CHRA and its members, is the question.
So yes, the meetings that were had with the representatives from the party were CHRA meetings. Essentially, the people that we tried to target within the major parties were those that we knew had some responsibility for the respective party platforms. In some cases, those were members of parliament. In some cases, those were party officials. As an example, for the Liberals, we met with a member of parliament who happens to be the co-chair of the Liberal Election Platform Committee. We also met with a fellow who works for the Liberal Research Bureau, who's been tasked with assembling the Liberal Party platform. With the NDP, perhaps no big surprise, we've met both with a member of parliament who is their critic for housing, as well as members from Jagmeet Singh's office, who again are responsible for writing the platform. So in all of those meetings, we essentially presented the three key messages in frankly more detail than what we're doing today, even in more detail than some of the background policy documents you'll see on the website. And just as an inside scoop, our messages have been well received. I think the NDP in particular have already made some platform commitments regarding community housing. Specifically, they've announced that they would build up to 500,000 new units of affordable housing. What's been interesting is now they're sort of working back from that a bit and saying, okay, how do we do that? And that's been the subject of several conversations. So as I mentioned in the presentation, those meetings continue. The parties are all at sort of different stages in terms of where their platforms are at. So as they flesh out their platforms, they're reaching out more and more to us to say, okay, let's talk about this. We need some insight into that. So it's definitely an ongoing process.
Great. The next two questions are very similar, so I'll ask them as one. So in the National Housing Strategy, they use the language of community and affordable housing. Would you be able to outline the difference or similarities between the two terms and how the federal government understands them? And basically, is community housing inclusive of affordable and social and rent geared to income?
So the terminology has been, admittedly, has been somewhat of a challenge that frankly goes back many years, both for this association and for others. We've chosen to use the term community housing. I'll have to check. There maybe have been some slippage where we use some alternative wording, but generally speaking, we've been trying to stick to the term community housing for a couple reasons. One, it's, as the question pointed out, it's the language that's been used in the National Housing Strategy, so it's familiar to government. And two, it's of a broad enough connotation that it captures a lot of essentially the groups that CHRA represents. So that would include social housing, supportive housing, co-op housing, of course, Indigenous housing, nonprofit affordable housing, essentially any below market type housing that serves a community purpose. I know that there's a lot of perhaps discussion, perhaps even debate about whether that's an appropriate term, but that's the one we've settled on because it really is, from at least what we can determine, it's the most all-inclusive term that's available. Okay.
As I move on to the next question, I'd like to remind everyone that there's still time for questions. So if you have any, just type them in for Jeff. So the next question is, if someone wants to host a local event, is there a list of potential organizations anywhere that they can access to potentially partner with to host a powerful and effective event?
So first of all, whoever has asked that question, thank you. As mentioned, it's difficult with 338 ridings when you're an Ottawa-based organization to reach out to individual candidates and all of those. That's why this whole campaign is predicated on the notion that our members and supporters will be the eyes, the ears, the voice out there throughout the country. In terms of an event, if anyone is interested in hosting, please let us know. There are a group, at least, of national organizations that we know of that can be partnered with, but those national associations will oftentimes have local or regional chapters or partner organizations that could be that we could recommend you be put in touch with. In addition, depending on which province or which region you're coming from, frankly, we can just use the benefit of our board members throughout the country to really identify some additional partners that you could reach out to partner to do this with. So the short answer is absolutely yes. We can give you a list of recommended partners based both on our national contacts as well as regional and or provincial considerations as well. So let us know, and the short answer is yes.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, would we be able to, or are we planning on, creating a summary that lists how the different political parties or the platforms line up with the three asks of CHRA?
So to whomever is asking that question, and I must say none of these questions were planted, the answer is a resounding yes. It is on our to-do list, which is essentially once the platforms are released, we'll be providing, probably in a chart format, a summary of what the parties are saying with respect to community housing, their costed promises, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, we'll be doing that, and that will be released, frankly, once we have the party platforms in hand. And we don't know when that is, I should add. Like there was just an article in, I forget, it was the Globe and Mail, talking about when is the right time for a party to release a platform, and the article's thesis was there is no right time. It's whenever a party deems it so. So we don't know when that is, but we'll obviously we'll be keeping a close eye, and once we get them all, then that will be communicated out to members and supporters.
Great. Next question is the federal government's Housing Supply Challenge put forward in their 2019 budget $300 million to challenge municipalities to come up with ways to speed up affordable housing construction. What suggestions would you suggest that we can present which are consistent with CHRA messaging?
Well, I think that the program that was announced in the budget, I mean, it's a useful program. I think obviously municipalities are on the ground. They have a lot of ideas in terms of how additional supply could be met. And I should add that the FCM is one of our key partners in housing, both previously and in fact just later today, if not tomorrow, we'll be sending FCM a copy of our website and having a discussion with them. Frankly, we've already had a couple of discussions about it. I think we'll have to wait and see what that quote unquote competition, what comes out of that, and how that can align. With respect to CHRA's position on increasing supply, our sort of overall position has been an all of the above approach. There's clearly no one silver bullet that will solve or that will increase supply. The co-investment fund was one tool. Some of you may have heard that Housing Partnership Canada has essentially taken the lead on creating a new, I call it housing bank. There's a different term that's escaping me right now, but that will increase access to capital. There's been some additional models that have been proposed from Quebec. There's the CHRA program, par exemple, that we've suggested CMHC and the federal government look at. There are some international examples. What we've said is we're not bound by any one particular model to increase supply. We think that the more options and the more tools that housing providers across the community housing spectrum have available, the better. So we're willing to talk to any party about how to do that. The one thing I'll add is as I mentioned, that we think the Federal Lands Initiative is a massively underused or has huge potential to create additional supply, both in terms of land and unused buildings. So that's one specific one specific proposal we're putting to the parties. But in terms of additional, we're quite open so long as the ultimate goal of increasing supply is met.
All right. The next question is about someone who's looking at our website and saying that they noticed that our website has some personal stories, a success stories section on our website. And the question is, and I think maybe I can answer this one, are we looking for additional stories from partners or the public? So the answer is yes, we are always looking for stories. We can't promise that we'll be able to. We've already had such a great number of stories come in that we can't promise that we'd be putting them up directly on the website. But we are also launching a bit of a social media campaign, which we can use at least some quotables from stories. So if you do have stories, you can send them in. Our email address is on the website. It would be the info@chra-achru.ca. If you connect with me, Dominica, through that email address, we'll be able to chat more about that.
And just to add to that too, one thing we'd really encourage you is, in addition to those stories, which are extremely useful, is especially for those of you who manage or operate community housing projects, is if you can get your tenants involved. This in no way, shape, or form is meant to be restricted just to CHRA members who are our contacts. We want the tenants in community housing to be actively involved. And so if you do happen to own, operate a building or a project, please absolutely share this material, whether it's in your newsletters or e-blasts or whatever you have to tenants. Please share and encourage them to raise their voices with their candidates as well. This is what will make the campaign successful, is the more voices that are speaking, the more chance that parties will be listening.
All right, so the next question is, are we also going to be providing any details or filling out the details on the cost of not housing, whether that's financial or social? Will we be providing more?
That's an interesting question, and it's been a difficult one to answer. I'll actually answer the question that wasn't asked, which is, will we be providing costing estimates to the things that we have been asking for? We're looking into that right now. There are some models out there that have been used primarily provincially, in which there's been some costing done with, what it would cost, for example, to implement a fully funded Indigenous housing, urban and rural Indigenous housing strategy, or what it would cost to completely renew the existing stock. That is a determination we're still making. But whether we'll be able to sort of identify what the costs are of doing nothing, that might be difficult to quantify. But frankly, I think this is where many of your personal stories could come in, because I think in many cases, you all know what the costs are of doing nothing. You're living it on a daily basis, whether that's been operating agreements that have expired and loss of subsidy, or whether it's insufficient funding for repair of existing buildings or lack of capacity to build new. I think that's where being able to relay what's happening in your circumstances, or if you're an association, for example, and your members, then that would probably almost have more bang for the buck than a more generic national figure.
Awesome. So the last question is an easy one, is do we have an email banner? And Shane, we do not currently, but I think it's a great idea, and we can put it up once we develop one. We can add it to the list of resources on that website.
And sorry, one last thing I just wanted to add, and I should have said this earlier, this is very much an evergreen process. Between now and Election Day, on the website that we've provided and the communications we've provided, there will be ongoing updates and changes and additions. The purpose of today was to start pumping the information out, to get people motivated to start the communication loop, but in no way, shape, or form think that this is it. This is just the beginning. And so, ideas like that, additional ideas I've mentioned, and even additional more, we'll be pursuing at some length over the coming months. So the best I can say there is stay tuned. There is more to come. This is an ongoing evergreen process, and we look forward to having you all a part of it.
Great. And if you have any further questions or anything about the website or about the campaign, you can always email us. The easiest is just to email us through info@chra-achru.ca, and we can always get to your questions through that. So I don't see any more questions coming through. So I wanted to say many thanks to Jeff and to all of you, our audience, for participating. So that is all. Thank you, and bye for now.